The idea that you can actually numerically predict what the weather is going to do.
Mhm.
Numerical Weather Prediction, NWP. Is that that's what it's called, is it not?
Yes, yes.
And in 1922, there's a man who you are very interested in, Lewis Fry Richardson, and he's a pioneer in numerical weather prediction. Tell us about him and why he's a pioneer.
Yes, one of my favourite people, Lewis Day Richardson. I rather like him. Um, so, taking us slightly back, Lewis Day Richardson was first involved in meteorology in 1913 when he was appointed the superintendent of Esdelmuir Observatory. He had no knowledge of meteorology at all. He was a physicist, and he was brought in to bring a more theoretical approach to the understanding of meteorology. So basically, to start working out some of the underlying equations that might help you to calculate the numerical weather prediction as it would become. And so he started working on this concept, and the first draft of his book, A Weather Prediction by Arithmetical Finite Differences, there you go, was actually ready not long afterwards. But he and the Royal Society sort of said, publish it, and he said, no, I want to do a worked example first. Unfortunately, along came the First World War. Now, Lewis Day Richardson was a devout Quaker, and he could not bring himself to have any of his work or anything that he was involved in be used for the furtherance of war in any way. He repeatedly asked for leave to join the Red Cross or an ambulance unit. It was refused because, of course, the work he was doing was really useful to the Met Office. So in the end, he resigned and joined a Friends ambulance unit, obviously Friends Quakers. But he took his work with him and worked on it privately. And he worked up. He did produce that worked up observation. It was actually basically, apparently to him, it was quite inaccurate, and he was quite disappointed. But actually, is it who looked at it later on? Peter Lynch, a more recent meteorologist, has gone back and looked at that. And actually, the only thing that Richardson didn't understand about at that point was the concept of smoothing, data smoothing. If he'd applied data smoothing, which is a concept that didn't exist at that point, so of course he couldn't apply it, he would have had an accurate forecast. So actually, his calculations, which were carried out in a war zone, were bang on, which is incredible. After the war, he returned to the Met Office and he published his book, which by this point is known as Weather Prediction by Numerical Process, and that was published in 1922. And that's basically, 70 years ahead of the concept of a computer. He is describing a computer. He's describing how a computer could work. And there's a wonderful phrase in it where he's just letting his imagination run riot and thinking, how could this theory of mine that I know can't possibly happen? How could it happen? So essentially, he envisages a theatre. Think of the Albert Hall, but a lot bigger. All full of boxes, and each box is a different grid square in the globe, with people calculating the observations for that grid square. And then there's essentially a conductor in the middle with a torch. And every so often the conductor will make a move, and everybody will pass their paper one to the right, essentially. And the conductor's keeping everybody in time, keeping all the motions moving in time, so that your forecast is created and goes around and keeps going around. And he reckoned he'd need 64,000 people to do it. Later people reckon it's more like 1 million. But if you show this to one of our IT experts, as I have in the past, they've basically said he's describing a supercomputer. He's describing the master-slave relationship of a supercomputer with the multiple nodes, or whatever they might be using at the time. Obviously, supercomputers have changed over time, to actually carry out these calculations. So he's got the idea in his head long before anybody had got a computer that could even get close to what he was trying to do.
1951, something rings a bell in somebody's head that maybe the Met Office should look at computers. Is that right?
Yes. So, as you say, post-war in the UK, a lot of the staff from Bletchley Park scattered essentially to different places. So you've got Manchester, you've got Cambridge, and you've got National Physical Laboratory. In the US, they sort of stayed together actually for a bit longer and became they stayed as a company kind of called Engineering Research Associates. That sort of then split off a bit, and various people were in there, including one called Seymour Cray, who founded Cray Computers, which became relevant to the Met Office later on in its lifetime. Within the UK, yes, they split up, and so you then had a computer at NPL, a computer at Cambridge, a computer at Manchester, and then the Lions Catering Company comes in, of all things. It's not quite where you'd expect the Met Office story to go, but it does. So Lions Catering, a very forward-thinking, very large catering company, starts deciding that they want to build their own computer. They looked at the options and they decided that they were going to build a version of the Cambridge computer. So they built their own Lions Electric office. With only 20 staff built it. They started in 1949. It was operable by 1951. They did a pretty decent job. So they built their computer. And that's sort of where it starts. At the same time, in May 1948, there was actually a meeting which was held jointly by the Met Office and Imperial College to discuss, and I quote, the possibilities of using electronic computing machines in meteorology. And so sort of from that, after that, a forecast research division was established at the Met Office. And then one of those members of staff went on a training course to Cambridge. And understood the Cambridge computer. And as a result of that, of course, there was a match of that Cambridge computer at Lions. And so the Met Office, two members of Met Office staff, Fred Bushby and his assistant Mavis Hines, started using the Lions Leo at Cadby Hall at Lions headquarters to do the very, very first experiments, explorations, if you like, into the application of computing to meteorology. We're not really sort of looking at NWP at this point. It's, can we produce charts? Can we put data in and get some kind of model out? They've got the first sort of atmospheric model calculations have been put together by Sawyer and Bushby. That was also happening in sort of 51, 52. So they sort of were playing with that in 1951. It's very, very early days, just sort of trying to see what they could actually produce with a computer.